Chapter 8 Surprise. Morning time crept through the dusty windows of an apartment. The light bounced from the floor and lit all of the rooms in a bright early light. The inside of the apartment was cool in temperature, and the sun's rays that fell in gave the flat a homely feeling. The usual cacophony of bird calls seeped its way into the house, leaving a calm atmosphere to encase the entire building. Workers and ninja who were busy building houses hit their hammers and sanded their floors, and that sound also carried through the walls, but was muffled to a light beating sound with more bass than anything. The light, through time, traveled all the way to a young woman's face as she laid there sleeping peacefully. Her blue hair was disheveled from the tossing and turning that one would normally go through while sleeping. Her flak jacket was tossed over next to the wall, leaving only her black long-sleeved shirt with a lone Uzumaki swirl on her left arm on her, as well as her ninja pants. Her leaf headband was left on a nightstand that stood beside the mattress, and her sandals were tucked away into a corner. Conan. She quickly opened her eyes and shot up in the bed. Once she did, she lifted a hand to her head in an attempt to staunch the morning headache. It must have been due to all of the crying she did the night before, so she closed her eyes and rubbed them a few times to get a better view of her surroundings. Her view was blurry at first, but it eventually cleared up into her normal field of vision. The sun didn't really help much, because it was truly bright in her eyes. It was never this bright in Amegakure, because of all of the constant rainfall, but she had to admit, it was a better feeling than waking up to storm clouds and rain. She put a hand to her face to block the brightness and walked over to the window. While closing the blinds, she slowly began to recall what happened the night before, although she couldn't remember anything of the time she was angry. A sigh escaped from her lips as she changed her pace to go to the bathroom and take a shower. She turned on the water to the right temperature and took off her clothes. Once she finished undressing herself, she stepped inside. After feeling the warm water cascade down her body, she continued thinking about what happened last night. That was truly the lowest point in her life, and she could vouch for that. She had never once broken down onto someone so freely like she did the night before. She never had to. But after reaching that point in her life, where she had no one else who knew who Conan really was, she couldn't help it. She almost lost herself. All of her friends were gone, and she also aided in killing Jiraiya, the only father figure she could really confide in since her parents' deaths. It was a real weight on her, and a big sadness on her heart, but oddly enough, she didn't feel like crying about it. Maybe it was from her crying session the night before? A slight smile formed on her mouth at Naruto's recklessness to help her. She had to give the kid respect for trying something so bold, but she couldn't deny the fact that she enjoyed it. It was calming, and she relished every moment from that time. If people were to question her if she liked the boy, she would decline it. She had no real interest in love ever since her last boyfriend died, and wasn't planning on having another anytime soon, if at all. Not only that, but Naruto was way younger than her, basically a decade younger. She would be pushing pedophilia if he ever thought of a relationship with someone his age. What on earth am I thinking? She thought with a slight snort and a shake of her head. There was no way she could ever see that happening, and even mentally laughed at the thought coming up. Speaking of Naruto, I wonder if he's awake. We will have to continue on his lessons today. She stepped out of the shower and dried herself. She put on the clothes she had the night before, but not without mentally complaining of the lack of wardrobe, knowing that her clothes probably stink. She stepped out of the bathroom and into her room, where the rest of her clothes were. Afterwards, she put on her flak jacket and zipped it to the top. She then picked up her leaf pt.8 and wrapped it around her forehead, tying it into a knot with its tails to secure it in place. After she dressed herself, she slipped on her sandals and walked out of her room. Naruto's room was across from her own, so it wasn't much of a travel. She knocked on his door and awaited a response. When none came, she opened his door and took a peek inside. He could sleep as hard as a rock for all she knows, so why not check? She creaked the door open and peered inside. She then heaved a sigh and opened the door all of the way. He wasn't there. His room was completely empty and was also messy to boot. She hissed in disapproval, but silently closed his door until she heard a click. Dirty and messy things were a pet peeve for her, as she was always a neat and tidy type. Now she could only guess he was in the living room waiting on her to get up. She took a few steps until she came around a corner and made her way to the living room. Hey, Naruto, she stopped abruptly once she stepped the corner. No one was in the living room either. A small frown appeared on her face at this new development as she stood there taking in the view. He must have been called for something important, she mused silently. After contemplating a little more on whether or not to go outside, her stomach grumbled lightly. She shook her head once she remembered she went straight home and didn't bother to grab anything to eat. She also mentally kicked herself for not eating once she got home too. Knowing that there was probably food in Naruto's kitchen, she turned around in a 180 and went to the cabinets. But what she saw when she turned around took her breath away. She slowly walked over to the dinner table and saw an object placed on the surface. She couldn't understand how she didn't see it earlier. It was literally something that screamed attention. Its design was almost perfect. She couldn't even speak, it was so beautiful. What lay in the center of the table was an orange-colored origami flower with a note beside it. She picked up the flower and looked at it in awe. She knew it had to have been from the orange-clad boy himself because, for one, Naruto was the only one living there other than her, and two, he would have been the only one to pick orange out of all of the colors in the color wheel. He was the only ninja that wore orange all of the time. She placed the flower back down on the table and picked up the note in its place. She began to read the contents, going over everything as slowly as she could. Dear Conan-chan, I hope you like it. You lost your old flower, so I thought I would make you a new one. I know it's not much, and seems like a sad attempt to apologize for my short-minded thinking, but I hope that you can forgive me for what I've done. I'm sorry. Naruto, a small upward curve graced her lips as she read the note once more. His apology was so childish, bearing something handmade in a note that lay beside it. But something about the apology made her happy on the inside. Naruto actually took the time to make an origami flower, which is something that is not relatively easy, and judging from the way Naruto is, he didn't know a thing about origami. That can only mean he spent quality time on it. Conan was an origami master, so she could easily make another flower if she wanted to. But after her fight with Toby, she lost the motivation to even make another one for herself, so she was really awed at the fact that he even remembered, let alone bothered to make one for her. After concentrating on what she wanted to do, she snorted to herself in defeat and gave a pitiful smile of acceptance to the flower. She wrapped the right side of her hair into a bun, picked up the flower, and placed the orange piece into the bun to keep it in place. Content with another flower in her hair after a week and 2 days without having one, she moved herself around the table to the cabinets and tried to find something to eat. Lucky enough for her, there were canned and packaged foods that lined Naruto's cabinets from one end to the other, to where she didn't have to rely on eating nothing but ramen. She fixed herself a plate of proportionate foods from different cans and whatever else she found that she wanted to eat and dug in. Once she finished, she washed her plate and put it back into the cabinet she found it in and sat on the couch to wait patiently. If Naruto was out doing something important, then it really didn't matter if she went out or not, because her appearance wouldn't really change anything. He reminds me so much of Yuhiko, Conan whispered quietly. Thinking of Naruto's linear thought processes let the woman reminisce with a nostalgic feeling. It was almost as if she were still there during the time she was younger. Back when they were kids, the orange-haired kid went off on his own a lot without telling them, and usually left Nagato and her worried. He would always come back and have some overthought apology which really held no water, and he would get chewed out by both of them. But in the end, they forgave him, and it only made their relationship grow for one another. Eventually, all of those times are what brought her and Yuhiko's relationship to the next level. His carelessness for battle damage and going out there not worried of the repercussions really stuck with her. He was reckless, but devoted to his country and protecting his friends. A true hero. Hey, Conan-chan, I'm back. The blonde's voice broke her out of her train of thought. She sat up as a small smile etched onto her face. Believe it or not, she wanted to see the blonde brat, even though he totally invaded her space the night before. But when she looked onto him, something that she would have never expected was revealed to her. Her eyes widened as far as they could go. It was almost earth-shattering upon seeing something like this. It was almost inconceivable. She fell backwards onto the couch and lay there, trying to say something, but the shock really set itself in. What? Naruto blatantly asked, shifting closer to the blue-haired woman. He didn't like it when people did things like this, but never actually said anything. What is it? Come on, tell me, later, Orange. Yamato looked over to Kakashi with a confused expression, who looked back at him just as confounded as he was. As soon as the blonde found out his predicament, he rushed over to Kakashi's and Yamato's tent to figure out his problem. The blue-haired woman trailed behind the Jinchuriki, wanting to know about it just as much as Naruto did, so Conan, Kakashi, and Yamato were all in the same tent looking at the Uzumaki with puzzled reactions. The brown-haired Anbu has never seen anything like this before, so he had to ask, Naruto, how did you get orange hair? I don't know. The orange-haired boy replied in concern. Conan-chan was the one who pointed it out to me. I just learned about it a few minutes ago. The Uzumaki was hurt at knowing that his hair changed from the blonde that he loved to a carrot orange color that he never really wanted. Blonde was his pride. He was basically the only blonde-headed boy in the entire Leaf Village, so it made him happy that he wasn't like the others. He didn't feel monotonous with his yellow hair. Even though orange was uncommon in the Leaf Village, blonde was more awesome in his opinion. Well, can you tell us exactly what happened the last few days? Kakashi asked the blonde, now orange-headed boy. Naruto thought for a minute before he brought up anything. Well, all I've been doing recently is training on my Rinnegan powers. I haven't really done anything else. Yamato looked over to Kakashi again before going into a thinking phase, placing his hand to his chin. This only further solidifies our conclusions from the other day. I have to agree completely with you, the silver-haired Jonin responded with a nod. That is exactly what it is. Wait. Can someone fill me in? I'm kinda lost, the orange-haired boy asked curiously but with annoyance. Yamato stopped his thought processes and looked at the boy with a somewhat serious look on his face. Remember when we checked on you the other day for any abnormal behavior regarding the Rinnegan? After he received a headshake in approval, he continued, well, Kakashi and I talked about how the Uzumaki carried the Rinnegan as a Kekkei Genkai, and, well, your hair change must have something to do with your awakening of the Rinnegan. That is if we are correct, Kakashi intervened, gaining the interest of the wood user. If Yamato is thinking the same thing as myself, then your Rinnegan has awakened your Uzumaki side of your genetics and placed equal dominance amongst your blonde side. The Uzumaki were known for their red hair, Yamato answered, continuing Kakashi's statement. We know it sounds a little too simple, but in other words, your Uzumaki red hair genes dominated with your blonde genes equally, making your hair orange. Naruto gazed into space after he heard that. He was a little sad knowing that his trademark blonde hair was replaced with a medium orange color, but after thinking a little longer, he realized it was something small and an after effect of the Rinnegan. He couldn't always have the best of both worlds, so he swallowed his pride and gave a smile. Well, I guess I can't complain. He then put his hands in his pockets. That only means my mom's side is finally coming in. Hold on, Kakashi said, cutting Naruto off before he could say any more. What makes you think that it's your mother's hair? Oh, Naruto responded, growing a huge foxy grin from ear to ear. I met the fourth Hokage. All three of the other participants in the room widened their eyes in surprise. No one really suspected that answer to come forth. Yamato and Kakashi knew what happened to Minato, and Konan had a basic idea as to what really happened. After a second, Naruto continued, he's the one who stopped me from becoming the nine-tailed beast. But, isn't the fourth Hokage dead? Konan blurted out, looking very confused to the others in the room. Well, not much is known about the Shiki Fujin technique, Kakashi responded while gazing over to the blue-haired woman. I'm guessing he must have put some of the last of his energy into Naruto before he died. He told me, Naruto began while staring intensely onto Kakashi, that the guy in the mask from Akatsuki was the man behind the fox attack 16 years ago. He said that he was so strong that not even he could do anything to stop him. Kakashi and Yamato immediately remembered the swirling masked man that they fought during their hunt for Sasuke. He's right, Kakashi-san, Konan told the silver-haired man. That man is the true leader of Akatsuki. He has worked in the shadows and bided his time until the time came for him to carry forth his plans. He used Nagato. It is all just some game to him. But if he used pain, then he is most likely using Sasuke too. The boy retorted with venom flowing from his syllables. It just as Jiraiya feared, the silver-haired man answered with a grim look to his features. That's who was behind the attack 16 years ago. Madara Uchiha. Naruto's eyes widened in realization. That's who Pain told me to watch for. Who is he exactly? Madara Uchiha was the former leader of the Uchiha clan who was supposedly defeated by the first Hokage. He is the only one with enough hate for our village to do something like this. Kakashi looked over to Yamato. We're going to have to tell the elders. Yamato nodded his head in agreement. What bad timing too, since what happened to Tsunade-sama this morning. Everything went silent for the orange-haired boy as he replayed that last message. What happened to Ba-chan? No one told you? The captain asked the orange-clad boy. When he received a headshake in rejection, he looked over to Kakashi, who looked onto him with a look of pity, then turned his head again to face Naruto and responded, she had a relapse. What? Naruto asked in a voice that held denial. What do you mean? Ba-chan was doing fine. What happened? Yamato knew the boy held some dear feelings for the Hokage, so he knew that Naruto wouldn't have automatically accepted that fact that was laid on the table. It seems as though she hasn't fully recovered from her fight with Pain. Kakashi looked over to the orange-haired boy while Yamato continued. We only received the news recently, but from what we've heard, she didn't wake up this morning. That only means that she has fallen into another coma. Naruto lowered his gaze. Well, can I see her? Sure, Kakashi replied with a nice smile. I don't see why not. You don't have anything else to do right now, and we don't need you for anything else. All right then. Naruto yelled in excitement. I'm off to see Ba-chan. Later. He then dashed out of the tent with pep in his step. Konan looked over to the Jinchuriki's exit and contemplated. He seems to be troubled. The blue-haired woman noticed that Naruto tried to cheer himself up. He was sad 1 minute, but all of a sudden changed it into a grin and brushed it off, as though it was nothing to worry about. If this were a couple of days ago, Conan wouldn't have noticed that, but now it's as if she all of a sudden gained an extra sense. Maybe I should follow him. Conan turned and went for the front flaps of the tent when an audible voice stopped her. Hold on, we have to talk to you for a minute. She turned around and saw the silver-haired man signaling for her to come back. Conan, while holding a flap in her grasp, looked outside again and saw the orange ninja running further away. She looked outward until he disappeared from view and inwardly sighed before letting go of the flap and turning back to Kakashi.
End of chapter 8.